Welcome to Fluent and Chill NBA edition. I'm Anthony K of Sports Fluent. I'm here as always with the man, the OG, J Dub Jermaine. How you doing, man?
What's up, brother? How y'all running this morning? Running good?
Everything's good. I love this time of year. There's just so much going on. The NBA is not back yet, but there's still so much to talk about. And, we started a series last week. We went a little black and white. We did the 50s. Mm-hmm. This week, and I told you last week, I don't know that I knew that much about the 50s. Mm-hmm. But now we're going to talk about one that I start to know a little bit better. I still wasn't born yet, but I know a lot of the names. So when we talk about the 60s, I feel like I know more of these guys because a lot of them played in the 60s and some of them into the 70s. So I think it was easier for me. So I want to start there with the 1960s. We know the big names, right? We know the Wilt Chamberlains, the Oscar Robertsons, Jerry West, Bill Russell. When you think of those names, it's hard. I know it's hard to have one that stands out, but does one or two stand out to you the most?
Well, of course, Chamberlain does, because Chamberlain was such a dominating force, man. He was just, the rules got changed because of him. They did so many things to hamper his game. And like a lot of people don't talk nearly as much about what Chamberlain did in terms of his impact in the game. I mean, we're talking about a guy who, where do you think standing behind the free throw line came from? Well, where did standing behind the free throw line come from? Chamberlain could dunk the ball from the free throw line without running. So the rules committee was like, wait a minute, you can't do that. Absolutely not. Chamberlain could touch the top of the backboard. That's why you can't shoot the ball over the backboard, because Chamberlain could touch the top of the backboard. So they're like, wait a minute, no, you can't do that. So they did a lot of things to hamper Chamberlain in terms of they widened the lane, and he still was awesome. But when you talk about guys in the 60s that were just awesome, I mean, we don't talk about Hal Greer nearly as much. We don't talk nearly as much about Sam Jones. I mean, Sam Jones is a starter on 10 NBA championship teams, and he averaged 19 a game on these teams. In fact, not only did he average 19 a game, Tone, this is a guy who Red Auerbach, his head scout, called him up and told him, I got a guy, I'm down here in North Carolina, and there's this guy that plays at this HBCU named Sam Jones. And he looks really good. And Red Auerbach is like, does anybody know why you're down there? No, he's like, good. Get on a plane and get back here now, because I don't want anybody knowing about this guy. And he ends up drafting Sam Jones, and Sam Jones became an all-time great. That's why I have such a difficult time putting Paul Pierce as high as I do, and even putting him ahead of Sam Jones. You're talking about a guy who started on 10 championship teams, averaged 19 a game in the playoffs. So that's really difficult for me. When you talk about the other guys in the 60s, Oscar Robertson, he averaged 30, 10, and 9 for 8 straight years. I mean,
so if there was a player today that averaged 30, 10, and 9, would he be as disrespected as Oscar Robertson is?
Not even close. Not even
right?
Close.
He was a 6'5" point guard, averaging 30, 10, and 9
for 8 years. If we'll take it a step further than that, Tone. Let's not say 8 years. Russell Westbrook is everybody's consummate pro. He's just so awesome. And he averaged 30 once? Oscar did it for 8 years. So if a guy does it once, where he goes 30, 10, and 9, we're Google-eyed at this guy. Like, wow, he's awesome.
But listen, if a guy averages 30, even just once or twice, just 30, forget all the other stats, we're going crazy about them. In a league, now I get it, scoring was higher. It was higher, the pace was faster. I get it. But I mean, I think the NBA now is averaging 110, 112, and back then it was 116, 118. It's not, it's more 6 points a game. That's not significant enough to say there's going to be, like, if you think about it, the number of people averaging 20 a game has quadrupled in the last 10 years. We don't talk about that.
No, we don't.
We still talk about, 20 years ago, he only averaged 15. He was garbage. No, 15, 20 years ago was good.
Right. And by the way, that 30, 10, and 9 that Oscar Robertson was averaging, we don't have a 26, 28 team league, which means that I got to see Jerry West a lot more. I got to see Sam Jones a lot more. I got to see Rick Barry. I got to see Hal Greer. I got to see these guys a lot more. Imagine Russell Westbrook having to see Chris Paul 3-4 times a month. Imagine
Drew Holiday.
Right. Imagine him. Oh, I got to deal with Drew Holiday 3 times
every 4 games. Every 5 games. I got to deal with Holiday.
I got to deal with Drew Holiday. So
I guarantee you, Paul wouldn't like that.
No, he would not. he'd be screaming for other teams to come into the league.
And it's funny. It's funny because in the same breath, we say, oh, the league now has, there's more teams, so it's harder to win. But at this, and there was only 10 teams back then or 12 teams back then, and so it was easier to win a championship. But didn't every team, because there was only 10 or 12 teams, have, that's why you had teams like the Celtics, who had guys coming off the bench who were Hall of Famers, right? Isn't that part of it? It's tough. I get it, because I do it myself. I'm talking out of both sides of my mouth because, yeah, there's only 10 or 12 teams, but that means each team was a lot better. Again, there's the exceptions to the rule. I want to go back a second because you brought up Wilt, and we don't look Wilt. Wilt is a unicorn, and I think it's hard to evaluate a unicorn because in most cases unicorns don't exist. And I got this sent to me maybe 2-3 days ago. I knew we were going to talk about this, so I wanted to everyone knows Shaq. Right? Everyone knows how big Shaq is, how dominant Shaq was. I'm just going to run you down Shaq versus Wilt, some of their physical comparisons. So without shoes, Shaq is 7 foot even. Wilt is 7'1". Shaq's wingspan is 7'7". Wilt's was 7'8". Standing and reaching up. Now it makes a point of saying in 1956 footwear, which were those, really bad Chucks with no sole, right? Versus Shaq in 1992. So standing reach was 9'6" for Wilt, 9'5" for Shaq. Their hand spread, 11.5 for Wilt, 11 for Shaq. Now, let me tell you a story quickly. I told you when I met Shaq in Phoenix, and he shook my hand, and I'll see if I could do it. So he shook my hand, and his fingertips came up to about here, about halfway up my forearm, right? So his hands was half an inch bigger than that. His hand length, 9.5. That is to Shaq's 9. So he's taller, longer arms, bigger hands than Shaq. At their playing weight, it ranged for Wilt from 258 to 320, Shaq 301 to 370. I guess they're including the Celtic Shaq there. But at their peak, it was 290 to 310 for Wilt, and it was 315 to 335 for Shaq. Their max reach, 12.9 for Wilt, 12.5 for Shaq. And then the last one was, now granted it's hand timed. I get it. But this one blows my mind. Hand timed. Shaq's 40 time in 2009. When people say athletes today are far superior than back then, stuff like this makes me go, well, okay. So Shaq's hand time 40 time in 2009, 5.8 seconds. And you would say Shaq was pretty quick to get up and down the court, right?
In 2009, you said.
In 2009.
That's year 17 in the league, by the way. Not year 7. That's year 17 in the league.
Yeah. So it's 5.8. So I get it. Wilt in 1966, 4.6 seconds.
Wilt running
4.6 seconds. 4.6. So, again, I get it. Nutrition, healthcare, weights, all that stuff. I get it. There's a bigger emphasis on that today. But don't tell me that Wilt was not. And I criticize Wilt a lot because I think half of the stuff is real and half the stuff is just, it's impossible. It doesn't seem real to me. However, those are facts. Those are truths. So when you look at Shaq and say, wow, what a dominant center he was, Wilt had all his physical attributes and more. And he had a post-up game, and he had a fadeaway. People forget the fact that he had a fadeaway jump shot. And they didn't track it, but he could block shots. Oh, and by the way, when they told him he was, now I think this was immature, right? When they told him you're scoring too much, you're too greedy, you're too much about yourself. I felt like he kind of took his ball and went home. But what did he do? Oh, he led the league in assists. Oh, so he could pass too.
Yes.
Now, the issue with Wilt, he was never able to put it all together, I think, and be a scorer and a facilitator and win. I get that. The winning part is the most important. But when you just look at him, that was the mid 60s.
Right.
And you had a guy like this. So, I wanted to put it out there because, we're talking about the 60s, and Wilt's not the only one, right? Like when you bring up Bill Russell, I bring up Bill Russell all the time, and people tell me, oh, his shooting percentage and his points per game. I bring this up to you. I know I brought it up to you before, so I'm going to be quick with it. But when he started in the 50s, his points per game and his shooting percentage, his field goal percentage, was top 3. And in the 60s, in the high-paced, high-scoring, you had guys like Wilt scoring, 50 points a game. He was still top 10 in both of those categories. So to say that he wasn't a good, shooter, field goal percentage-wise, or wasn't, only 17 points per game, I got to put it into context. Yeah, you're comparing him to today when everybody's averaging 20. But back then, that was top 10.
Correct.
So,
not only that, Tone, let me ask you this question. What about Wilt makes you go, no way? No, when you hear stories and such about Wilt, what makes you go, no, I'm not buying it?
Okay, so the 100-point game is really hard for me to buy, and only because of 2 things. One, how does a guy who shoots like 50% from the free throw line just magically shoot like 80, 90%? That one just is hard for me. Now, I know they were feeding him the ball, and I know all the scenarios that went around it. So that one's really hard for me. The other one is I heard a story, and maybe I'm holding on to this story too tight because I don't want to believe it, was that there was a scorekeeper there who said, oh, my, we just, anytime we saw, if we weren't paying attention, we were looking at our score sheet and then a bucket went in, we just put Wilt because he was scoring everything else. So now, does that mean he scored 98? Does it mean he scored 102 because they missed some? I don't know. So that one's hard for me, but I get it. I get it.
Now, when we talk about athletes, right? So, if I'm not mistaken, Bill Russell was invited to the Olympic team in '56. Yes. So we could start there, and I mean, you fast forward 25 years, almost 35 years later. I mean, Kenny Smith came in second place in the dunk contest in 1990. So when you talk about athletes, I can understand the evolution of the athlete, but these guys were just as good. And Wilt, the reason why he said that he would, I think Wilt said he would average about 50 to 60. And this was in the 90s. He's like, I'd average about 50 to 60. And the reason why he said that was because he had to see Walt Bellamy. He had to see Bill Russell. He had to see Willis Reed. He had to see all the big guys, all the great big guys. He had to see them way more, as opposed to in the 90s, where there's a huge lapse between Olajuwon, Ewing, David Robinson, Shaquille O'Neal, and then there's the other guys. There's like 15 or 16 other guys that I have to see who I would probably destroy these guys. Nate Thurman. I got to see those 4 or 5 guys regularly. I mean, Shaq had to see David Robinson. He was in the league. He was in the Eastern Conference for what, 4 seasons? So I only had to see David Robinson and Hakeem Olajuwon twice a season. That was it. I only had to see.
And that's where you go the whole, more teams. You didn't have to see the greats as often.
Right.
And, back to your question. So the 100-point game, as I mentioned, the other part, the quintuple double, right? Now they weren't. I get it that somebody was, but they weren't officially tracking blocks and steals. So how did he? I get someone said, "Oh yeah, I was counting," or most famously, he said, "Oh, I count. I knew all my stats. I knew everything."
So when do we come up with 26 blocks then, Tone? Why not 30? Why not 22 blocks?
I don't know. That's my point, is how do you know? If they're not tracking it, I have a hard time when unofficial stats. Right. And my biggest one, to be honest with you, the one, because it has nothing to do with basketball.
Oh,
one a day since the age he was 6. I don't know.
I'm on him. I'll take it a step further than that, and I'm thinking since age 18, 2.5 a day for like 20 years. I'm thinking, oh, come on, Will. There's no way that's going on.
And that's the same ones. And different ones. Yeah, not the same one multiple times.
Yeah, that's
different one every time. So, when someone is that braggadocious,
like, nah, yeah.
It's hard to believe. But then I also think nowhere near nothing like that. But I know I've done some things in my life where even I'm like, wow, I did that. That's pretty cool. But not anything like that.
Put it in this context, Tone. Fill up the Staples Center with women. there's still 1,500 waiting outside. Does that make any sense? Come on,
So,
man.
so again, I know that it's something that makes me go, if like, I believe he did most of the stuff,
Yeah.
but do I feel like it's a little bit exaggerated? Probably a little bit. But even then, hey man, he's phenomenal. He's, high jump. We always talk about how good he was at high jump. Do you know that Bill Russell actually jumped higher?
I did not know that. No.
Bill Russell was a better high jumper. But we
did
don't
not know that.
He doesn't because Bill Russell's not the type of guy to come out and tell you,
No.
hey, I did this. You have to look it up.
That's correct.
So give me one. So there's a lot. So I have a top a list. This is not my list, but I put in top players of the '60s, and tell me who's missing from this. It's 8: Wilt Chamberlain, Oscar Robertson, Jerry West, Bill Russell, no particular order, Bailey Howell, a name I'm not familiar with, Walt Bellamy, Sam Jones, Bob Pettit. So I'm familiar with all of them except for Bailey Howell. Who needs to be on that list? Who else needs to be on that list?
I think Nate Thurman. Is a guy who but Nate didn't come in until the late '60s. So I think that list is pretty accurate. I think that list is pretty accurate because when I think about Sam Jones, I think about Bob Pettit played half of his career in the '60s, and from the '59-'60 season to the '64-'65 season when he retired, he averaged 27 and 15. So he was awesome. And when you're talking about guys in the '60s on that list, I don't think you left anybody off. When I think about Willis Reed came in '67, so he was better in the '70s. He was more of a player in the '70s. I don't think you left anybody off that I'm thinking about off the top of my head that I can go, Bill Sharman, he didn't come. Bill Sharman, he retired in '63. I mean, he's in the Hall of Fame, just like Kuz retired in '62. So yeah, that list works.
Okay, I'm going to give you, and we're going to end it on this, and then we're going to jump into the present. We're going to fast forward to 2021 again. But here is the '60s, according to NBA.com. The all-decade team, first, second, and third team. Let's go deep. We'll go deep. So we've talked about most of these guys. So Jerry West is at guard.
Mm-hmm.
Averaged 40.6 points per game in 11 playoff games in 1965. I just want to point that out because that's fantastic. Okay, so you got West and Robertson as your backcourt. Probably makes sense. Russell and Elgin Baylor, another guy. Elgin Baylor. No one talks about Elgin Baylor enough. And I get it. It's his finals record. Mm-hmm. But we're giving out awards for people just making it to the finals now. So
that's what you left off the list too, Tone. You left
Elgin Baylor was off that list, yeah. And then Wilt Chamberlain, obviously, at center. So I think we've touched on all those guys. The second team, you said Sam Jones, Hal Greer, you talked about. Jerry Lucas, they have in Jerry Lucas, 2020. That's what they call him.
He was a rebound machine.
He was a 20 points, 20 rebounds.
He was a rebound machine.
Absolutely. It literally says an automatic 2020. Mm-hmm. And Lucas, Chamberlain, Nate Thurman, Bob Pettit are the only other players in NBA history with 2020 with 2020 stats. John Havlicek. We don't talk about Hondo enough either. I think he's a Celtic. It's tough when you're a Celtic. Mm-hmm. There's so many great Celtics. It's same with the Lakers. Those two franchises obviously have so many great players. It's tough.
Yep.
And then Bob Pettit as your center. Mm-hmm. And then the third team. So these are the guys, because there's one here that I forgot. And then because I remember how good of a coach he was. And people forget I think he's second all time, maybe first in all time wins. But we forget about what a good player he was. No, hold on. So Guy Rogers is at the guard of the third team. I'm not familiar with Guy Rogers. The other one, and this is the one I was like, Lenny Wilkens.
Lenny Wilkens, yeah.
We forget about what a great player Lenny Wilkens was, and we forget about what a great coach he was.
Yes.
I never hear his name brought up at all. And, he's 1, 2, or 3 in all-time wins in the NBA.
When he retired, he was number 1.
When he retired, he was 1.
He was number 1.
Do you hear his name ever? You hear Popovich, you hear Jackson, and then it bounces back to Red Auerbach. Like, it's like there's this void in the middle where Lenny Wilkens was pretty great.
I think that Lenny Wilkens and Bill Russell that just happened. I'm trying to think of the guys that are in the Hall of Fame as players and coaches.
There's 4.
Right. There's Lenny Wilkens, Bill Russell. I think Casey Jones is in the Hall of Fame as a player and a coach. I can't think of the fourth guy off the top of my head.
We'll get to it. I'll put it up. You'll see it right up here.
No problem.
I'll list all 4. So then at the forward positions, Bailey Howell, who I mentioned, who was a 6-time All-Star in the 60s, played for the Pistons, the Bullets, we're not allowed to say that, sorry, the Wizards, the Celtics, and Howell averaged, he was a 20 and 10 guy for the whole decade. And then Tom Henson. Are you familiar with Tom Henson from the Celtics?
Tom Heinzen.
Heinzen.
Yes, Tom Heinzen. He's from Union City. So I'm thinking about it. I'm thinking about Toronto. What's a suburb of Toronto?
Richmond Hill.
Richmond Hill is Toronto is Jersey City and Richmond Hill is Union City.
Ah, okay. All right. There you go. And then the center, no surprise, Willis Reed. He was Rookie of the Year in 64-65. And it says, I love this because it says apologies to, and I want to shout them out, Walt Bellamy, Rudy LaRusso, Nate Thurman, Bob Cousy, and Wayne Embry. Wayne Embry is a name people should know too because not only was he a great player, but he's also done so much for the NBA, for diversity. If you're looking into that sort of thing too, definitely look up Wayne Embry. All right. So that's enough of the black and white. Although I do like looking back. Let's talk about last week. We talked about the Atlantic Division, and we're going to go through each NBA division and just give you here's what we think they're going to look like this season. So in the Atlantic, the Central. Excuse me, we did Atlantic last week. Central. We got the Bucks, the defending champs, the Pacers, the Bulls, the Cavs, and the Pistons. I want to start at the bottom because the Pistons got themselves a player.
Yes, they did.
They got themselves a player. What do you think we're going to see from the Pistons this year? Cade Cunningham, is it just growing pains, not a lot of wins, but
a little bit of both? A lot of both, in fact. With Cade Cunningham, they're building that. It looks like they're building that team around Cade Cunningham, Jeremy Grant. That's who it looks like they're building that team around, and they got to get him some more players. But he is one of those players who reminds me. I don't think he's the athlete that Grant Hill was, but I think that he's a better athlete than people give him credit for. I think he's got the ability to be an elite defender. I think he's going to be a great playmaker. Jeremy Grant's going to come back better this year. Jeremy Grant was right at the doorstep of winning the Most Improved award this year. He was right there, but that Detroit team was just as bad as they were. So I think that it's going to be bad for Detroit, but they do have building blocks in Cade Cunningham and Jeremy Grant. So
other than you mentioned that you made the comparison to Grant Hill, do you see him kind of like a Grant? And I know he's got to get the turnovers down, but do you see him as a kind of Grant Hill type of player, like kind of all around?
I do, Tone. And to be honest with you, I can't fault him for this because that's what the game is today. I would have loved to have seen him stay in school maybe another year. I would have liked just him also in Green. I would have liked to see, because I'm not sure if he's ready yet, but I understand why. I absolutely get it. But at 6'8", his ability to play make, his ability to rebound, his ability to defend, he reminds me, I don't think he's the athlete that Grant Hill was, but he reminds me a lot of Grant Hill and how he plays. And I think that he's going to be dynamic. I think that he's going to have some growing pains as a rook, but I think that as time goes on, he's going to be a quick study.
If I could sidebar for a minute, I get it, right? We've had Moses Malone, Kobe Bryant, Kevin Garnett, LeBron James, the list of players who've come straight from high school into the pros that have been legends, right? There are some. I think people forget for every LeBron James and Kobe and Kevin Garnett, there's about 5 to 10 guys who had no business coming straight out of high school, and it ruined their lives, not just their careers.
Correct.
And I get it that professional basketball isn't necessarily the real world, but in the real world, there are jobs. And now I don't agree. Now I don't agree with this either, but there are jobs where it says you must have this educational background. And
that's called a job requirement. That's not a discrimination or anything like that.
No, it's just a job requirement. Listen, you have to have. Listen, I had to. A little too much into my personal. I had to go take an online course to get an MBA because they would not promote anybody into a VP role unless they had an MBA. I did not have one, and that's what I had to do.
That's a requirement.
It's a requirement.
Sorry.
So why the MBA? Now, does it need to be a 4-year full degree? No. I think the one and done is not only hurting the pros, but I think it's hurting college basketball because players know I'm coming in, I'm going to do my year, and then I'm going to leave.
Right.
And that's not. I don't think that's good for college basketball. I don't think it's good for the NBA because now you got guys coming in who are super talented, super athletic, but are their skills honed enough? Are their fundamentals anywhere where they need to be a
Right.
professional? No, I don't think so. More importantly than that, as a human being, sorry, I know people are going to fight me on this, but at 18 and 19 years old, I don't know what I'm doing yet. I'm
I have
not
no
making the
idea.
best decisions, at least for me personally. Maybe there's exceptions, but for me personally, I'm not ready.
Not
So
only
I
that,
would,
Tone. Not only that, Tone. I enjoyed being 19 and hanging around with other 19-year-olds. I
yeah,
enjoyed living in the dorm and eating cafeteria food. I
I,
enjoyed that.
I think people forget. I think people forget that the NBA is a business,
Yes.
and they look at the money, and I get it. Oh, millions of dollars. I'm super. Yeah, but you know what? You got to travel all the time. You're away from home, away from your family. You're living out of a hotel. It's not. Listen, I did a job where I was traveling about 22 to 24 days out of the month. I was not home. And let me tell you, the first little while, going to Hawaii, going to Alaska, it was great. You know what happened after month 3?
Got old real quick, didn't it,
Man, I
Tone?
miss my bed.
Got
Man, I
old
miss.
real quick, didn't it?
Yeah. And I did that for 3 years, and I tell you, I will never do that again. So there's a cool factor about making millions of dollars, obviously, in traveling. But at the same time, I feel like maybe a 4-year degree, maybe that's asking too much. But I feel like there needs to be at least, because there's 2-year certificate programs. I feel like if to be in the NBA, you need to do this one thing: have a 2-year business certificate. Because what's the scariest part about the NBA for me is that 70% of players 3 years after retirement are bankrupt. 80%. Why? Because, hey, I just made all this money. I'm a kid. I don't know what to do. I got all my friends. I got all my family. I want to do the right thing. I want to help them all out. Buy my parents a house. Buy a Lamborghini. Oh, the checks stopped coming. Now what?
What do I have to fall back on? Sure.
Nothing.
Absolutely.
So that's why I'm like, I don't like the one and done because I think it hurts the play on the court for both. And from a personal standpoint, especially now with NIL, you can get some money staying in college. So I feel like 4 years might be asking too much. I think 1 year's not enough. I think 2 years, and then I think, and maybe I'm going way too far into this. I'm sorry. I know I set a sidebar, and I know we're pressed for time, but I want to make the point.
Which is fine.
I feel like at 2 years, there should be a committee. Maybe it's a committee because I don't want to trust the NBA, and I'm definitely not trusting an agent. But I think at 2 years, there needs to be a decision made. I'm going to go 2 more years in school and get a degree because, hey, what happens life after athletics? Take it from a guy who didn't take school seriously because I was playing ball and thought, hey, that's going to be my life. And then I got hurt and everything blew up. Right? Like it happens.
My logic really quick, Tone, is let's take away the one and done. If you want to come right out of high school, you could go right out of high school. But if you go to school, you got to stay 2 years.
So you're actually exactly. So here's the thing. So I was going to get to that perfectly. Great segue. So 2 years is that bit, but you have to take these business courses to learn how to control your money. So 2 years, at 2 years, and maybe we do this out of high school too. There's a committee that says, okay, we're inviting you to the draft. Because that way guys don't just make a decision poorly to come out. It's a committee of people who say, hey, yes, they're talented enough. They're going to be drafted. Because I hate when someone comes out of high school and they get drafted in the second round, and then now they're going to go to the G League or I don't think that's good for them. I don't personally. So I think maybe at high school that same committee says, hey, we'll invite you 3, but if you do, because now you can have an agent because of NIL. So hey, if you don't get drafted high enough, that maybe that team still owns your rights, but now you got to go back into school. Same at 2 years, same thing. And then after 4 years, hey, all bets are off. Do what you got to do. You have your degree. You're there. But I think 2 years, I think, I agree with you. 2 years, and then, like I said, or straight out of high school. Because, look, there are exceptions. But I think it should be invite only. Because if you ask me out of high school, I was ready to play pro. No, it wasn't. I'm never ready to play pro.
I know I wasn't.
No, but that's the confidence. But that's the confidence you need to have, right? When you're one of those elite players, I'd never ready. I'd never.
I know for a fact I wasn't.
I was not either. But I'm saying in my mind, I'm sure you thought this way. Every shot I shot was going in. Right? That's your mentality you have to have.
Yeah.
So I think you need to put in those markers to let kids. And let's be honest, at 18, 19, you're a kid. I know you think you know everything,
Yeah.
but
You
trust
think
me,
you do.
at 30, you're going to say, I was so dumb at 18. At 40, you're going to say, I was so dumb at 30. So,
It's crazy that you mentioned kids too, Tone, because that's an interesting segue because that Cleveland Cavaliers team, they have nothing but kids. But in the process of them having kids, they got a really good mix of kids. So when I look at that unit, I still don't know what to do with Colin Sexton. I mean, he's 25 a game. He is awesome. He doesn't pass though. So I'm still trying to figure out what are we going to trade him? Are we going to hold on to him? What exactly are we doing with this guy? Are we going to leave him at the point guard? Are we going to put him at the 2? And if we're going to do that, what are we doing with Garland? I think you got your front court set with Allen, Laurie, and Mobley. I think you got your front court set with these young guys.
What a nice front court.
I think you got your front court set with these guys. And if you could do something where you could get a team to bite on Kevin Love, maybe at the trade deadline, and maybe get a 1 or maybe even a 2 for him, that would help tremendously. But I don't think that this Cleveland I think that they're going to be interesting to watch too, Tone, because remember, with that front court, and I understand having Laurie, but they got a guy who I want you to pay attention to this season in Isaac Okoro. I want you to pay attention to him, Tone. He was on an all-rookie team. He probably was, if he wasn't their best player on their summer league team, he was their second best player on their summer league team. So I want you to pay attention to him. I don't know how good Cleveland's going to be this year. I think that they're going to struggle, but I think that they're going to be better than they were last season.
Do you think, I don't know if anyone bites on this, but do you think a Kevin Love, someone's going to want Colin Sexton, right? Just he can flat out score, and there are teams that need scoring.
Mm-hmm.
A Colin Sexton, and I partner him up with Kevin Love. You want Sexton and his 25 points a game? You got to take Kevin Love's contract. And can that bring them in a guard, a nice young guard, maybe not a superstar guard, but a guard that could grow with that front court? Because if they had a kind of defensive pass first, I know those are rare to find, kind of guard to kind of get those big men the ball in transition, they could be good in a couple of years, right?
I'm actually thinking more of a vet guard instead of a young dynamic guard. I'm thinking more of a vet guard, a guard who can score the basketball, but who is more of a distributor to get these young guys and their confidence high and just get them developed so they can be better. Now, I can appreciate development isn't that prevalent at this time, especially being a head coach, because I'm going to lose my job in 2 years if we're going to continue to suck. So the notion of being the notion of developing, that kind of goes by the wayside. However, I think that they could use if they could get a trade like that where they can get themselves a vet guard, somebody who could score the basketball and who can be a good leader. I don't know who's on the market. I can't tell you who's on the market now.
It's a tough one, right? Because as a vet guard who can do that, you're trying to go to a team that has a chance to win.
Right.
Very few of them want to go and develop players. We saw what happened in Toronto with Goran Dragic. Right? He would have been that guy for the young Toronto front court, and he was kind of like, I have different ideas, right?
No.
So that's what I'm saying. There's not a lot of guys like that, but I hear what you're saying. But that's why I thought maybe younger, because hey, let's take a chance on someone who, or maybe I don't know, maybe this might be insane. Ben Simmons.
That's not nuts, Tone. And the reason why that's not nuts is because number one, you got a guy who's a distributor now.
Distributor, right? Could play defense.
Yes, you got a guy who's a distributor, and that may work for them in Cleveland. But the problem is that Philly is not taking Kevin Love contract.
No, that's fair. Yeah, fair. You'd need a third. You'd need a third team in there for sure.
A third team to get involved in that, because Philly is not taking that contract. Absolutely not. But that would work with Ben Simmons, because now I got my defender on the wing. I mean, Colin Sexton is a defender, but he's not a Ben Simmons defender. And now you got your distributor, you got your rebounder, you got your playmaker, and we got guys on the wing who can score. And all Ben has to do is concentrate on getting those guys involved, and that's it. He doesn't have to do anything.
And that's a long team.
Yeah, it is. That's a huge team.
Defensively, that's a good team too.
That's a huge team. Absolutely.
Hey, Daryl Morey, there you go. You're welcome. Or sorry, I should say Daryl Morey, because he's trading away, Ben. But all right, so let's move. So Cleveland, Chicago. Chicago's just, for me, it's a bunch of question marks.
Well,
it's a bunch of question marks.
I'm looking at the Chicago team and I'm looking at that Indiana team, right? And I'm thinking to myself, can I flip-flop these two? Because Indiana is not that far away, man. What the problem with Indiana is they've been snake bitten. They can't stay healthy. TJ Warren was 22 a game, then he messed up his foot, and he's out for the rest of the season. Then you got Sabonis, who's an all-star. You got Malcolm. He's awesome. So these guys, they got a really good team in Indiana. The problem that they've had is they've been snake bitten with Miles Turner, who's one of the better defenders in the game, one of the better rim protectors in the game. And they got their bench because one thing that I found out about the holidays, defense runs in the family.
It sure does. It does.
Defense runs in the family. One of the things that we do around here, basketball is in the family. We defend around here. We might not be able to give you 25, but we lock up around here. So they got both the Holiday boys who both defend. That Indiana team isn't bad. They're really good. They just been snake bitten, and we already know.
Do you believe in curses? Because I feel like ever since the Malice in the at the Palace, it says every Pacer player, just from Victor Oladipo to just everybody, just they've got these. They got great players, and then they're just always hurt.
Always hurt, man. And if they could stay healthy, I think that they would make a lot of noise in the Eastern Conference with Malcolm Brogdon and T.J. Warren and Sabonis. I think that that's a really good Indiana team, and I think that they'll give Chicago some problems. I think that they'll give Chicago a lot of trouble if they could stay healthy. That's the difference with them. Chicago, I've already told you, Tone, I need to see what they do defensively. I need to see who they are defensively before I can get on Chicago's page. I already know who they are offensively. DeMar DeRozan is a bucket. He's 22 a game. You go on the other side, and Zach LaVine is one of the best athletes that I've ever seen. And he's 26 a game. Now you got your floor general in Ball, who also is a defender, and he can knock down threes. And then you got your box work in the Euro and Vooch. So if Kobe White can turn into who I think he can turn into, I think that Chicago team is going to be good, but I need to see who they are defensively, and that's up to Billy Donovan.
Did I miss you? I don't know that. Did you say the GOAT's name? Did you mention Caruso? Did you mention Alex Caruso? Because I don't know that you mentioned the GOAT.
I keep forgetting there's a statue of Caruso outside the arena, and I don't know what I was thinking. Man.
Yeah, forgot about
Caruso is going to help Chicago tremendously.
No, he is. He's going to help them come. Like I think he comes off the bench. I think look, he's a high energy guy. He's I think he's another guy we've turned into this kind of mythological player,
like a folk hero. That's
a folk hero. Yeah,
he's a folk hero.
But if you ignore all the hype, that stuff, he's actually a nice player off the bench, right? Good energy. He can shoot. He can get to the rim. He's a very serviceable player off your bench that gives you energy, which is important in this league.
Rewind the clock, Tone. If you look at Caruso could play for any of those playoff teams in the 90s. He could play for any of those playoff teams in the 2000s. He could play for any of those playoff teams in the 80s. He is a great rotation guy. Absolutely.
And I think you also, but just to go back to Indiana as well, Karis LeVert, right? He's still there.
Yes, he is.
And I think he's another player who, if can stay healthy.
If can stay healthy,
I think he's a very versatile player too, right?
They've been snake bitten. That's the difference with Indiana. It has nothing to do with talent or the mixture of talent that they have. They got a really good mix of talent. If they could just hold up, I think that they're going to make a lot of noise in the Eastern Conference. A lot.
So the last one, and then is obviously the most important one. That's the class of the divisions, the Milwaukee Bucks. I think we both think until someone beats them, they're the class of the East for that matter. Now they've lost a couple of pieces, but you think the departure of PJ Tucker will allow Bobby Portis to kind of take over that role?
I do. I think that Portis is going to help them tremendously. I don't like losing TJ. Not only do I not like losing PJ Brown, I don't like him going to Miami. That's I can handle losing.
I would have liked him to go out west.
Toronto or Phoenix, not even Phoenix, no, but definitely out west. We can't lose him to Miami,
like Portland or
something like that. Tone, we can't lose him to Miami. Absolutely, whatever Miami is offering him, we got to hold on to him. But I think that Bobby Portis, that opens up the door to give him more minutes, more shot attempts, more clock. Just gives him an expansion of his game now, where he can play more and relax more, as opposed to before where he only played, which I still didn't get a satisfactory answer on why he wasn't playing as much as he should have in the playoffs, because he's an energy guy and we need that. We need him to be that. And I think that he's gonna take the place of PJ Tucker and be more of that for the Milwaukee Bucks.
Well, there you have it. We went through the 60s. We went through the Central Division. Next week, the 70s. We're gonna get the lava lamp out. We're gonna get our disco shoes on. We're gonna get the disco ball up here. And we're going to talk about the Southeast Division and what to look forward to next week. So until next week,
Take it light. Take it.